Welcome to my review for The Evil of Frankenstein. You'll find all my other Hammer reviews in my Hammer playlist. So this is the third out of 7 in Hammer's Frankenstein series, and technically it is a follow-on from the previous 2 films, Curse of Frankenstein and Revenge of Frankenstein. Peter Cushing is back once again as Frankenstein, but there are continuity issues this time around, and I think there were several reasons for that. Firstly, Universal co-financed this film, and they wanted to introduce certain elements which weren't there for the first 2 films. Also, different director. Terence Fisher did the first 2. This time around, Freddie Francis is directing, and he certainly had different horror sensibilities to Fisher. And if you want another reason, Jimmy Sangster was not penning the screenplay this time around. So if you asked me which of those things was most responsible for this being such an odd follow-up to The Revenge of Frankenstein, I'd probably say that it was likely all of them, the perfect storm, so to speak. And the issues with continuity are there right from the opening scene. When we're reintroduced to Frankenstein and his assistant Hans, they're working on a new experiment in some little shack next to a stream. It's a gorgeous matte painting that shows us this location, but this is just not where we left these characters at the end of the second movie. They were in London. And given the fact that the locals discover what they're up to and chase them out of the area within about 5 minutes of this movie starting, it does leave me wondering, well, why not just have them start off in London and have them chased out of London within 5 minutes, and then you still end up where you end up for the rest of the movie anyway? I still like this opening scene though. It's got a great atmosphere. You see all these swirling tree branches in the failing light of day, and there's a great moment where Frankenstein bumps into this little girl and he sort of reaches his hand out to help her and then swiftly retracts it again. It's a great moment because it shows us that there is good in this character, but it's sort of too much effort. You know, he's got bigger fish to fry. He can't be sticking around to help little girls lost in the woods. So Frankenstein and Hans head to Karlstadt, back to the scene of the first movie, and once I realised that this is where the film was going, I was happy about this for 2 reasons. Firstly, I think it's good that Frankenstein doesn't just have an endless array of chateaus and shacks and castles that he can go to at the start of every sequel. And also, this was potentially a good trilogy closer, having him go back to where it all began. There was the potential for great conflict with all the villagers who possibly have had the reputations of their businesses affected because of the fact that this monstrous guy comes from the same town as them. But we never really explore this angle in this film. There are some scenes in the township, but those little divergences are more for comedic reasons than anything else. By the time we get to the villagers storming the castle at the end of the film, which I predicted would happen long before we got to that point, and I was right, just not in the way that I thought, I feel like we should feel the emotion of this charge up to the castle, you know, when they're with their pitchforks and torches or whatever. It should feel like a real moment of reckoning. We should feel the anger in their hearts and in their heads, a bit like in that film, The Evil That Men Do, with Charles Bronson, when all those people go after that scientist guy with such anger at the end of the film. But it just doesn't feel like that in this. It kind of feels like the villagers are only going up there because the burgomaster asked them to, and they're happy to go along with it because, hey, it's Saturday afternoon and they're spoiling for a fight. Speaking of the burgomaster, I was confused watching this for the first time because I thought to myself, what does that mean? Burgomaster? Burgomaster? Apparently it's the name for a mayor in certain parts of Europe, but all the way through this film, when I kept hearing that word burgomaster, this is the image that came to my mind every time. My 2 favourite scenes in this happen just after Frankenstein and Hans first get to the castle, because the set on the inside looks absolutely amazing. There's weeds coming through the windows, there's rubble. All of Frankenstein's old equipment has been smashed up. It looks great. It looks like they put some real effort into this set. At the same time as Frankenstein's heart is clearly breaking at seeing all this, my heart is leaping out of my chest thinking, yes, what a great set. Not long after this, we get treated to this flashback of when Frankenstein did his experiment from the first movie, but it looks nothing like our memory of that first movie. Everything's all more space agey, and the equipment looks more fancy. There's now this retractable roof that looks like something out of a James Bond villain's lair. There's all these industrial red coils covering the creature's body, and most amusingly of all, there's like a giant light bulb behind the head of the creature in the middle of the experiment. I mean, I can just picture in my head Frankenstein going to his local thrift store and picking up some light bulbs and saying, "These light bulbs, have you got them in this size? I'm trying to light up my castle ballroom." So for a while, I was really annoyed at this flashback because I was just thinking to myself, this is another example of just terrible continuity. This is completely inaccurate to the first movie. But then something clicked with me. I thought to myself, actually, this is not a flashback. This is Frankenstein's deluded memory of what happened in The Curse of Frankenstein. In his head, this is what it was like. He had all this fancy stuff. It was like one giant step for man and all that. Of course, later in the film, my interpretation of events was shot down because they end up rediscovering the body of the monster that you see in those flashback scenes and using him all over again. And when Frankenstein rebuilds the lab, it's with all the same equipment that we see in the flashback. So yeah, that didn't turn out very well for me, but I still like that more futuristic set when I look back on it. It's so well designed. It just puts a smile on my face thinking about it. Having said that, the monster that we get this time around is really bad. I can't remember off the top of my head what the monster from Revenge of Frankenstein looked like. I just know that it was a darn sight better than this one. And I can picture Christopher Lee's version very vividly. That was way better than what we get in The Evil of Frankenstein. This is one of the areas of the production of this film that Universal stuck their crow in, because they've sort of insisted on using the more flat forehead style that they used to have back in the 1930s Frankenstein films, which is fine, but the design of this particular one in that style is bad. The forehead's just too outwardly sticking. When I was at school, a long time ago, we used to have these rectangular beanbags in PE. They'd bring them out so that we could use them in the obstacle race once a year. When I look at the Frankenstein's monster in this film, I feel like they've got one of those rectangular beanbags, taken it and put it against the forehead of the actor, and then just got like loads of cardboard or whatever and put it over the top of that beanbag. It's a shockingly bad look. There are not just issues with continuity though, there are also problems with just basic character logic. So at one point, Frankenstein and Hans go down to the township for an evening meal, and this made me sit up because in The Curse of Frankenstein, Frankenstein's fiancée could not even get him to come out of the lab to have a meal in the dining room. Never mind spend an entire evening eating out at some cafe or bar. Even worse, before these guys have even touched any of their food, Frankenstein gives their position away to all the locals by calling out this official that supposedly he's stolen his ring, plundered it from the castle at some point, but it just doesn't chide with everything we've seen with Frankenstein throughout these movies up to this point, because he's been so single-mindedly obsessed with his main mission statement, you know, solving the riddle of life, bringing somebody back from the dead. He just generally doesn't get distracted by piddling little things like a ring, you know. So the fact that he would do this is really, it just doesn't seem right to me. I guess you could put it down to him just coming out with this in the heat of the moment, and he hasn't thought it through, as unlikely as that would be for him, somebody who's so cold and meticulous. But in the next scene, he goes on some crazy mission to the burgomaster's house to get this ring. He's decided to just take it by force by barging into the guy's house. But by this point, he surely would have had time to calm down, to realise that it's just not worth it. I mean, what is it about this ring? It's never been mentioned in any of the movies so far, and yet now it's like the watch from Pulp Fiction. It's worth sacrificing anything for, potentially. But even though the scene is completely ridiculous, the scene that follows when he goes into this burgomaster's house, I still enjoy it because it's so funny. I mean, Frankenstein basically repeats the exact scene from the James Bond film The World Is Not Enough, where Pierce Brosnan's Bond shuts the police out of a bedroom, locks it, and then gets loads of curtains and things, ties them around his waist, and then jumps out of the window and slides down to the ground, except in this film it's a bit more of a smaller scale version. But it's so funny the way that just as he's going through the window, he turns to the burgomaster's wife and says, "Evening." And the look on this woman's face, you can tell that this is the biggest thrill she's had in this bedroom since she got married. It's really funny. There's also a bit of an issue later in the film with logic when the hypnotist decides to send Frankenstein's monster back down to the township to, well, not back down, he's never been down there before, the monster, but he sends it on a kind of assassination mission. But this creature has been, up to this point, struggling to even stumble around a room, and yet now he can go all the way down to the town and find an address by himself and then carry out this complicated assignment. It just doesn't ring true for me. I'm also going to take issue with the title of the movie while I'm going through all my complaints here, because The Evil of Frankenstein, this is the least evil Frankenstein has been in this entire series. I've seen all 7 movies, and he's definitely more mellow here, I would say, than in any of the others. There's one moment where he asks Hans what he's even doing with him, following him around on this lifelong mission, and I don't think he would have even asked that of him in any of the other films. He would have just presumed that any companion of his would, of course, want to be with him to see great things achieved in science. But yeah, he's suggesting to Hans that maybe he could better get knowledge at university and things. And Frankenstein has a lot of people with him at one point in this film. He's much more willing this time around to let people into his inner circle. In the past, he would only really deal with Paul, his lifelong friend, and I think in The Revenge of Frankenstein, he only let Hans work with him to begin with because of blackmail, if I'm remembering it correctly. Yet this movie could basically have been called Frankenstein and Friends Raise the Dead or something, because at one point he's got about 4 people around him. He's got Hans, this beggar girl that they pick up at one point, and there's a hypnotist character who, for a short time anyway, seems like he's going to be another friend, and then there's the creature floating around. There's just a lot of people for a time. Would it surprise you, though, if I still said that I really enjoy this film? I watched it for the 2nd time in my life the other night, and I did have a good time despite everything. There were a lot of things that I wanted to get off my chest in this review, and I think that I have, but what can I say? I still enjoy watching all the shenanigans that Frankenstein gets up to in this. The soundtrack is really great. I love the main theme. The explosion on the side of the castle at the end is fantastic. All the miniatures and matte paintings and set design in this are just absolutely gorgeous. Yes, there are problems with a lot of the film's internal logic, and obviously the continuity is just appalling. This film takes severe liberties with all the work that had been done in the series up to this point with the Frankenstein character and the world that he inhabits, but it's still a fun film. I still have a smile on my face when I'm watching it, so I can't give it a completely bad score. Before I do get to the score, I'll quickly show you my version of the movie. Here it is. I've only got the DVD version. I bought this a couple of years ago. I believe that there are now a couple of Blu-ray versions out there. One of it is the collector's edition, which I think is only available in region A. There is a more bare bones Blu-ray that you can buy anywhere, but I'm not in a hurry to upgrade my copy because this is actually a really good remaster, and it's got a good 28-minute documentary which I watched last night. Very insightful, really enjoyed that. So let's get to the bag of terror then and find out what my score is for The Evil of Frankenstein. 1, 2. So we've got 3 bloody axes out of 5. That is not a bad score, is it, all things considered? It's been quite a while now since I did my review for Curse and also my one for Revenge, probably over 6 months actually since I did the reviews for those films. I think I gave those 2 films 4 out of 5, but my appreciation of those has actually gone up since I did those reviews, so I'd probably give those movies maybe 4.5 out of 5 now, but I digress. 3 bloody axes for The Evil of Frankenstein. I can't see my score going any higher for this particular one. I think I've maxed it. I think I've maxed out the possible love I could give The Evil of Frankenstein with all of its issues. So 3 out of 5. and a promise from me to you that I will be back very, very soon with another Hammer review. Until next time, cheerio.